Good Sunday morning. I'm Hugh Keaton.
And I'm Bill Snyder. Welcome to WLOX News this week.
So we are now just a few weeks away from the 2025 state legislative session, and State Auditor Shad White this week announced his legislative priorities.
That's right. And Shad, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Topping the list, though, is teacher pay.
So Auditor Shad White this morning, your plan includes less money to administrators, and this would be big. Basically moving money from administrator pay to a big pay raise for teachers. You say potentially teachers could get $13,000 per teacher.
That's right. And you know, I looked into this from the perspective of the state auditor's office, both because I care about our public schools, but because I'm a product of our public schools. My mother was a 35-year public school teacher. What we find when we dig into the data, unfortunately, is that Mississippi spends a higher percentage of our K-12 budget on administration than every other state in the South. And you look a little bit deeper, you realize, well, we still have the highest paid state superintendent of education, but some of the lowest paid teachers. We've got some superintendents in small school districts making more money than the governor, and school teachers in those same districts still going out of pocket to pay for their out of classroom costs or their classroom supplies. So this just doesn't make good sense to me, and I think we need to refocus our dollars, not just moving them away from administrator salaries, but in general moving it away from waste and fat in the education bureaucracy and getting it into teacher salaries where it actually makes a difference for kids.
And speaking of waste and fat, you've also looked into some of the state agencies, some of that spending there, kind of talk about that, and maybe some specific examples, maybe not in the exact department, but what are some of those things? And I'm sure they're probably common sense things, but unless you look at it with a fine-tooth comb, you don't know, right?
That's right. That's right. We did a big project over the course of the last year. It's very similar to what President Trump is doing right now with the federal government through Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, which is a great project. We wanted to do that here in Mississippi too. So we dug in, we looked at state agencies and found about $335 million worth of recurring waste every single year in state agencies. And it's everything from TV screens that are being purchased for about $5,800, which is way too expensive, all the way to buying too many cars and too much travel costs, even compared to some of our similar states like Louisiana or Iowa or Arkansas. So what we decided to do is let's formulate this into a report, right? Let's show it to the taxpayers where all this waste is. Some of the changes to cut the fat can be made by the agency heads, but some of them are going to require legislation. And so this year for the legislative session, we'll be putting together a package of bills that will help the legislators implement some of this plan. We call it Project Momentum, very similar to the Doge project you're hearing about from Elon Musk. I'm excited about it because it gives us a chance to make state government leaner and smarter.
$335 million in waste. You are essentially asking agency heads and the legislature to cut things that they could potentially benefit from. How hard of a proposal is that?
You know, some of the proposals are easier to get done than others. That's always the way it is. You know, when we're talking about travel costs, for instance, what we're basically saying is, hey, ask yourself tough questions before you go buy another vehicle for the state. That's a pretty easy one to do. Some of them are much more complicated. So one thing we recommend is that if you're a state agency and you're going to go buy some laptops, maybe we should have a structure where you could partner with 3 other state agencies who also want to buy laptops so that we can buy in bulk and get some savings. Some of those kinds of things are going to require statutory changes that put maybe one agency like the Department of Finance and Administration in charge of those procurement or back office processes. We just have to be smarter about this, and we got to use a little bit of common sense. You know, when families face tough times, when businesses face tough times, they cut the fat and they get smart about what they're doing. State government needs to do that too.
When you're doing that, setting up your agenda, you were talking about the bills with the teachers maybe getting a little more of the pie as far as the budget goes and the waste. What are some of the other things you're looking at as we get closer to January?
Sure. So one thing that we've talked a lot about in the state auditor's office is DEI funding, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And those words may sound nice to a lot of people, but we wanted to know actually what are these DEI programs at our universities actually doing with taxpayer money. Unfortunately, what they do a lot of times is very controversial controversial. Even at best, a lot of it is wasteful. So for example, at my alma mater, Ole Miss, we looked and their DEI office was doing grants to study social justice yoga for preschoolers. This is just kind of a silly use of taxpayer money that doesn't need to happen. We need to be spending money on educating our students at our universities. So we're going to again propose that the legislature do what a lot of other states have done, which is cut off the funding to DEI programs, and instead let's use that in a way that's smarter. I'll give you an example. North Carolina just eliminated all funding for DEI at their universities, and they instead moved all that money into campus police. That's just good common sense, makes campuses safer, makes students safer. It's just better for everybody.
So when we're talking about DEI, this money originally had to come from somewhere. Why did the money get approved in the first place if it's so controversial?
You know, I think early on, years ago, when these DEI programs were popping up, nobody knew how controversial they would be. And so when the universities set them up, nobody asked any questions. But my job as state auditor is to ask hard questions. Even if it makes people a little bit uncomfortable, I get hired to tell taxpayers where their money is going and what's being done with it. So we ask the hard questions about these DEI programs. And unfortunately, we find between 2019 and 2023, about $11 million of state funds went to pay for these DEI programs, and they're not going to scholarships for poor kids or something like that. They're going to typically pay adults' salaries. In fact, the lead DEI staffer at Ole Miss makes more money than the governor of Mississippi and the lieutenant governor of Mississippi combined.
Eye-opening.
Eye-opening.
That is,
it's eye-opening. This is what taxpayers deserve to know, and we need a change.
Right, you got to get that out there. And finally, one of the things we were going to ask you about, you got your book out there with the talking about what happened with the whole welfare thing, right. And that was what a few months ago. Kind of tell us where that is and how that's going, I guess.
Sure, yeah. So wrote a book about the welfare scandal here in Mississippi. We were at the end of the investigation, and so I thought it was important to tell voters, tell taxpayers what happened. The book has been received really well because people wanted to know what happened with their money. The cases are still ongoing right now. So 7 people have pleaded guilty to either state or federal charges as a result of that scandal. The state is still suing many others to try to get that money back in civil court. I suspect that we'll be sitting here, the 3 of us, next year, and those cases will still be going on because the court process is often slow in big cases like this. But I'm hopeful that eventually the state is able to recover as much of that welfare money as possible.
Still an ongoing process. Right. You did get some pushback from the book from high-ranking state officials.
Sure.
That's ongoing. And the question is, why did you feel the need to put the book out now, while you're still in office, while the investigations are still going? Why not wait until it all runs its course?
Well, I'd correct you a little bit. The investigations really are not going on. So for about the last year, we have not done any investigating because the facts have basically been dug up. A lot of this happened 4 and 5 years ago. The FBI has not asked us a meaningful question in over a year. So the investigation piece is done, and that meant that it was time to tell the public what happened here. I suspect that the real reason that some folks are mad is not that I've released a book this year, it's that I released a book at all telling the truth about what happened. You know, I've noticed that in Jackson a lot of times you'll have some politicians who will do their job some days, but if it involves making somebody powerful mad or a celebrity mad or a powerful lobbyist mad, all of a sudden the politicians run scrambling. And I know that I was hired by taxpayers to do my job even on days that are hard and to tell the truth about what happened to your money, even if it's going to make somebody mad. And so really that was the point of both the book, and it's the point of me going out and talking about this too, is to tell taxpayers what happened to their money and what we can do to stop this from happening in the future.
State Auditor Shad White, thanks so much for joining us this morning, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you for having me.